Welcome back to another episode of ContinuousX podcast, where we try to solve for X in the SDLC equation. We're back with Jamie Duncan.
Hey, Rick, how you doing, man?
Great to see you again, pal.
Right. Jamie, I was wondering, what mindset would you suggest our public sector agencies and our audience to adopt when venturing into modernization efforts? Specifically, a lot of the message has sometimes been lift and shift, take what you've got, get it into working in the cloud. Is that sufficient? But because there's also this message out now of being very cloud native, and doing cloud from the start. Is that re-architecting the infrastructure? Is that what you need to achieve your mission? What's and of course in generic. What are your thoughts on it?
Because it's solve everybody's problem, Jamie.
Yeah,
solve everyone now.
yeah, right now. We got to deliver this by close of business. Yeah, Michael. I always vision our industry as this swinging pendulum, right? Where we swing way out to things that are sort of cloud centric.
Yep.
And oh my God, why do you even have a data center? And then we're swinging back right now. Amazingly, no one has stopped building data centers.
Right.
Every time I fly over Dulles, I see new data centers.
Yep.
There's data center row right around the corner. It's unbelievable.
Right. So for all of the people that are 100% cloud now, there's a whole lot of brand new fresh data center space. It's kind of a false, it's a false decision to make. It's just a straw man that doesn't hold weight. Put your application where it belongs. Number one. So that sort of get to the cloud. No, get to where you solve your solution effectively. On that pendulum, success is found in that boring middle almost all the time. So think through, and the one thing that where does my application go has to be number one, whether it goes on an on-prem cloud or on-prem bare metal or whatever. The one hard and fast rule that should almost never be violated is my app needs to live near its data. Data locality is king.
Yes.
So if I'm generating a bunch of data on-prem, I want my app on-prem because I need it to be close to my data almost every time. Or if I have a bunch of data that can't leave my data center for regulatory or sensitivity needs, put your app there.
Right.
Shoving every call out an AES 256 tunnel to a cloud just to say you put it in the cloud does not help anyone.
I agree.
So put your app there. In that boring middle is where we find success. We also find decision trees. There's not that whole run to the cloud thing, lift and shift everything, just get it out of my data center. There are a whole bunch of worthless VMs floating out there. We know, it is just known, it is known, Khaleesi, that a huge percentage of VMs are sitting at almost idle almost all the time. Because, when we were talking about Kubernetes in that other episode, that was the building block we had.
Right.
App equaled VM. So new app needed new VM. Because commingling multiple applications on a VM meant, reliability issues, meant dueling banjos with libraries and network stacks and all that stuff that I couldn't afford to do because VMs were VMs. So we know there's a bunch of those out there.
Right. And VMs were designed to run at 10% maximum because you got to handle the spike.
Right.
Right. So,
right. And we oversubscribed everything in VMs to infinity. So, if anything ever started to run hot, it just crashed all of its friends and became a very noisy neighbor. So, lifting and shifting worthless VMs to the cloud just means you have a worthless VM in the cloud. It doesn't gain value by being in someone else's data center.
Well, it gains value for the cloud service provider, but okay.
Right. And I don't turn down money. Full disclosure, I like dollars. They let me go do something. But it doesn't help anything.
Right.
So that idea of lift and shift bothers me just on its face because the odds of you moving cruft and trash, lifting and shifting trash is effort that just should probably not be applied. There are a huge percentage of those sort of pseudo-idle VMs that are just these little small state-needed local internal applications that are running some variation on a LAMP stack.
Yeah.
You can put that thing in a container in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that is not a high bar to clear to get a Node or a PHP app or even a Java app into a relatively efficient container. So when you're doing that shifting, grab that low-hanging fruit and turn 30 VMs into 30 pods in one Kubernetes cluster. Even if they won't handle horizontal scaling, even if you've got some code in there that won't let you do that, restarting a container is way easier than restarting a VM.
Yep.
Even if you don't gain reliability, you still bin pack more tightly. Take advantage of it for those small, and so you get rid of a ton of cruft. And yeah, and some of it, if you've got a mature application that's happy and healthy, lifting and shifting that guy to the cloud, if that's where your business needs lie, thumbs up, go for it. There are things that will never be in a container for good reasons. There are things that should never be in a container. There are things that are running on bare metal for good reasons. Because that's where they make sense. So lift and shift, I'm not a fan of, but intelligent migration, measuring ROI. If it's going to take me 6 months to figure out how to containerize this ridiculous application that uses 37 sockets and 400 different file mounts and some of those crazy Frankensteins we've all seen in our experiences.
I built
I may have, yeah. It's more than one has me in the source control. If it's gone away in 2 years and it's going to take me a year to get it into a container, the ROI is not there. So I don't like that idea. Like, in the cloud salespeople are probably the world's worst at this. Like we're the problem here. Because we roll in with this, oh, I can migrate your VM to a VM here. And you click a button and it does all the things and it's magic. You decide if it's magic you need. Like your goal is to fulfill mission reliably. You have reliability needs, you have uptime needs, you have service level objectives around speed and accuracy. Fulfill them. But understand what they are before you start shoving things around, because you can probably enhance them and spend fewer dollars in the process without a mountain of effort. So like, it's not a clear answer because I don't think there should be one. Because too long, or go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'll get dovetail off of that because you're hitting a great spot for me, because our theme in this ContinuousX podcast is to convey the notion that you have to do these activities continuously. And one of them is continuously inventory what you're doing and constantly evaluating where you have value and removing, as you said, removing the dead VMs, like the things aren't used. Well, when you have a monolith, the same process should incur. You should be looking to break that down into more modular,
sometimes
testable. Yeah, sometimes. But if it's working, great, and providing value, fantastic. Move on until your next repetition of inventory or evaluation.
But even with monoliths, like we've seen, so Istio, which is an increasingly important component in any distributed mesh, in any distributed software cluster, went from multiple services back to a monolith and massively improved how it functions. Like, make your code look good for the code. Don't worry about fads. Like, we're all going to be wearing ugly shirts in pictures 10 years from now. Just be okay with, nothing ever hurt wearing a decent t-shirt and a pair of jeans. Like, it's always in fashion. Just don't worry about the trends on the edges. Probably the most and absolutely necessary, purely evil thing that we did about 10 years ago were figure out self-service VM workflows.
Oh, interesting. Because they
were wholly necessary for the growth that needed to happen back then. And they are pure evil now, because there are so many VMs floating out in these data centers that are completely critical, that have murky chains of custody and little to no documentation or knowledge about what actually happens in them. I'm pretty thoroughly convinced the reason lift and shift is popular is because no one wants to address that problem. No one wants to burn the cycles to figure out what we automatically provisioned and stuck in prod because it was just always there. Like, no one wants to solve that problem because it's expensive and the ROI is zero.
Sure.
But when you think, like, when you two hop it in, the ROI could be massive. If I figure out what this thing's doing and where it needs to live, and I can put it in a container with, a 5-line Docker file.
Right.
Man, I'm golden.
Right.
Like, now I'm saving terabytes of RAM, terabytes of disk space, hundreds or thousands of CPUs just with an audit of what's running on VMware in my data center. And if I move that to the cloud, thumbs up. If I move that to on-prem kube clusters, thumbs up, because I'm realizing the savings no matter where it goes.
And I think that's key, Jamie. And just to put a fine point on this, when we're talking about resources, because things are being so commoditized, things are getting cheaper and cheaper, that people are just reckless with them now, where they still need to maintain that engineering discipline of use what you need. Don't just use it because you have it.
Well, we called it worst case scenario provisioning. When we had VMs, because VMs were holistic objects, I had to give it as much RAM as it would ever conceivably need.
Right.
Because I knew the RAM was going to be oversubscribed on the host, because that's the way VMware worked. And I knew I was going to want my share because my app at some point was going to spike up to that value in theory.
Right.
And then it's sitting at 3%, 99.8% of the time. And that worst case scenario provisioning just eats up so much heating and cooling and dollars.
Yes.
We don't have to do that anymore. Again, that idea that it's hard, when you have all of these little LAMP apps or variations on the theme, running them up against a profiler to figure out sort of what's the theoretical max RAM. And the vast majority of those things scale horizontally anyways. Mm-hmm. So instead of worrying about 16 gigs for this little PHP app, give me 5 of them at 4 gigs. Mm-hmm. And just let Kubernetes do what Kubernetes does. I get there, but I'm able to bin pack them more tightly. I don't have to worry about the host they're on. I solve so many problems just with the little basic application profiling that ain't hard anymore. And 10 years ago, that was hard to do. We all know. It ain't hard now. And just with the little investigation of what does that VM sitting over there actually mean to me, answering those 2 questions lets you put it in a more intelligent place. If that's a lift and shift into another platform, the ROI there can be massive at scale. It's well worth the investment.
And speaking as a project manager and Fitz, I hope I'm speaking for you as a lead developer. The part of the time on a project is coming up with those engineering specs and coming up with those estimates, where it's just literally throwing darts on against the board, against the wall. So the amount of time saved by not worrying about that so much, I'm saying not worry about it at all, so much that it gives you more time in your project.
I was once on a meeting. There had to have been 30, 40 people. And we were on it for an hour, and they were going over every component and maximizing. I was like, the time of our salary would have bought a new server, and we wouldn't have had to ask a question.
Right. We just count by 4s. That's all we do. 4, 8, 16, 32.
Yep.
Just squares of 4, squares of 2.
Just give me the biggest thing on the market. We'll be fine.
Right. With self-service, we know that if I have a self-service portal, I'm going to pick the maxes.
All right.
And speaking as someone with a scratch VM inside Google Cloud that has 128 gigs of RAM, I know we're going to do that in 32 cores because those were the biggest numbers I could request for my own little VM.
Right.
It's the way humans work. I want the biggest piece of cake at the party.
Because I don't want to be called at 2 a.m.
Right. Yep. I want my pillow to be soft at night.
Well, Jamie, again, another riveting episode. We really appreciate it. Thanks to the audience for listening. Stay tuned as we pop the question to Jamie in our next episode, just to wet your whistle a little bit, while we try to solve for X in the SDLC equation.
Are we getting married?